Welcome to A Place of Yes, a podcast about how I moved through my darkest hour. And for me, that was in channeling my grief into good. Welcome to the show. Today, I am very excited about this guest because we are circling back to our roots a little bit. When we started A Place of Yes, we really wanted it to showcase families and the work that we did with Jake's Help from Heaven. It really started as a direct offshoot of that. And in the beginning, we did a ton of conversations with families. And we have since, we talked to grief counselors and we talked to different, authors and doctors and different things. But I always want to make sure we come back to our roots. And I'm excited because I think with today's guest, we are doing exactly that. So I am sitting here with David Robinson, who is better known to me as Miles' dad. Jake's Help from Heaven has been working with you and your family. I looked this up because I knew it was a long time, but since 2014. During that kind of research that I was doing to get ready, I showed you when you came in, I found like our initial visit with Miles, and he was like a little tiny
so
Miles.
Tiny. Yep.
I was there, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and he's a big boy now. He's 10.
Yeah, he's almost a teenager.
He is. He's almost a teenager. So can you share with the audience a little bit about you and your family and Miles, and tell a little bit about your story?
Well, as you said, my name's David Robinson. I'm married to Jolene, my wife. We have two boys, Oliver, who is 8 and is a typical 8-year-old, and Miles, who is 10 and was born with microlissencephaly.
You say that much better than I do.
Well, I remember the doctor sitting with me. He's like, micro, Latin for small, listen, German for smooth, cephaly, brain, Latin and Greek. So when you put it all together, it's small, smooth brain. We found out probably 2 or 3 months before he was born. We went to our last ultrasound visit. The pregnancy had been perfect. And in the last visit, they said, oh, something doesn't look right. And then they sent us for a fetal MRI.
Okay.
And they determined that his head size wasn't tracking to where it should be. And so they tried to prepare us for microcephaly, dysgenesis of the corpus callosum. Okay. They threw all these terms at us. We went home and Googled it and panicked. Jolene and I decided right then and there that whatever the outcome was going to be, we were going to do this together and we were going to give him the best life we possibly could. So
and up to that point, you had no idea.
No idea. Okay. That last 2 months, I guess, was sort of weird because you want to maintain that optimism of this upcoming birth, and you want to expect the best. And we're like, okay, well, maybe he'll be developmentally slow. We may have some issues, but nothing that we can't overcome. We weren't necessarily prepared for the eventuality of how he came. So Miles is non-ambulatory, nonverbal. I remember when they came to get us to tell us what was going on. They brought psychologists. They brought doctors.
Oh, really?
Like it was a whole serious team.
Right from that ultrasound.
Oh no, this was after he was born. While we were in neonatal.
Okay.
I mean, he looked perfect.
Oh. Of course he did.
You couldn't tell. You couldn't tell anything. Everything was small, so a small head didn't look much different than the small body. So they did an MRI, and that's when they knew the full scope of his disease. I remember them asking us what we wanted to do, as if there was an option, and we had already determined we're bringing him home, and they sent us home with a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years.
I'd like to just reiterate, he is 10 years old.
Yes, he is 10 years old. But, I mean, as new parents, how impactful hearing that kind of, how impactful hearing that kind of news is. A friend from high school reached out to me on Facebook like in a day or two after Miles was born. And she sent me a poem, Welcome to Denmark.
Oh, I know this poem.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know the poem, I'll paraphrase it a little bit. When having a child is a bit like planning for a marvelous trip that you always wanted to take, let's say to Italy. You buy books and you learn languages and you get an itinerary. You think about all the great things you want to see, the Colosseum, Michelangelo's David, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, like all these things you want to see. And you get on the plane. Today is the day. You grab your bag. And when you're mid-flight, they say, welcome to Holland. There's been a change. And that's where you're at. You could wallow in the fact that you never made it to Italy because all your friends are going back and forth to Italy and they're telling you how great it is.
And
And it seems like everybody in the world gets to go to Italy. The poem goes on to say that if you don't stop to recognize the beautiful things in Holland, Holland has Rembrandts, it has windmills, it has dams and dikes. It had tulips. Yeah. If you don't take the time to stop and enjoy the things that Holland is over, if you spend your time mourning the loss of going to Italy, which is an incredible loss, the grief of what I wanted Miles's life to be.
Well, that's what, yeah.
Right? The grief of what I wanted our family's life to be. It's real, and it doesn't go away. No. I mean, I'm 10 years in. It doesn't go away.
When I started this podcast, we were really talking like things that I found to be like traditional grief, right? Like so Jake died. So what is that grief? But what we have explored in so many conversations, which is exactly what you said, it is the grief of what you thought was going to be. And when Jake was sick, I struggled, right? Because I was like, oh, if I feel bad about the life that we now have, then that's kind of mean. It took me a long time.
The guilt.
The guilt of that grief. But I have since learned, and I think so many people are doing this so much better than I did at that time, is kind of knowing sort of like the Italy or Denmark, right? Yeah. Like it's okay to feel sad for what you don't have. And you can simultaneously be thrilled with what you have. Like both of those things can exist.
It doesn't have to be worse. It can be different.
Yes. A difference between Miles and Jake that I would love to sort of, because I talk about this sometimes and I say it in a weird way, because I actually sit here and I'm like jealous of you and your story. Mm-hmm. Not because Miles is still alive at 10, but because you had a name, right? Like you had a disease to deal with. And even though there's a horrible life expectancy, like I can't imagine what hearing that is, we didn't have any of that, right? Like Jake was born healthy. He was 8 months old. He had a seizure, like a neurological event. No one really knows why. No one really knows anything about it. And then we lived this life with this undiagnosed, but he lost everything, lost all his milestones. And then he passed away when he was 4. And we had no answers, nothing to Google. So sometimes it's so weird to say, but right?
I'm sitting
here and I'm like, you had a disease to Google.
But I get where you're coming from. But so the first year, I remember if we went to Boston Children's Hospital, we're getting DNA testing to determine what caused it. We were already told, in neonatal that there isn't anything that's going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? There isn't any cure. There's no pills. They let us know there aren't any, very, very few, if there are any teenagers or adults, and we're seeing that, which we can get to. It's still unknown. And when we go to the doctor, so we don't know what caused it, we go to the doctors and we're saying, well, what can we expect? Right? We're here. He's here. You've taken an MRI of his brain. You should be able to tell me what to expect. Every family we've encountered with this, they all are getting the same message. Your child is going to write their own story. Which to a parent in that situation is meaningless.
No,
it's meaningless.
It's words. It's nothing.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't even give you a direction. You want to have some expectation. Is he going to sit up? Is he going to walk? I remember I cried the day they came to measure him for a wheelchair, because in my mind, I have this dream that we can do anything. We can fix this. Miles he'll walk. I mean, he was only 6-7 months at the time. We can walk. We'll practice. We'll get there. We started therapies early. Yep. I mean, we have therapists in and out of our house for the last 10 years, 3 or 4 times a day, which is something else that's weird. Coping with living in a house where you're pretty much
really
never alone.
No, it's not your house.
But you also have to maintain some sense of normalcy for everyone else in the house. For Oliver, who's this is his only life. This is his only childhood. And I don't want it to be marred by feeling like you're living in a facility or feeling like there's strangers around all the time. Our nurses have been with us 6-7 years. They're part of the family.
Which is such a blessing, because we talk to so many families who it's hard to find quality.
We're approved, and it's real. We're approved for 24-hour-a-day nursing. We have a nurse that comes in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 8:30 to 3. And we have a nurse that comes 4 nights a week from 8:30 in the evening to 7, because Miles can't sleep alone. So if a nurse isn't there, then it's either Jolene or I. And you can imagine the impact that has on a family. But we could have 24-hour nursing if there were 24 hours worth of nurses available.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's not. I mean, we've been blessed for Lauren and Datina. Again, they're part of our family. I can't imagine not having them. I don't know if we would have such a positive outlook on things if we didn't have them.
Have that help. No, I think again, this sounds weird, but when I'm at your house or at some of our other families' houses, I feel like I know this world so well, right? And I'm so removed from it at this point. but I know that life, right? And it's just, you talk about Miles not being able to be alone. Like, we had yet to explore like nursing or any of that. And it was a long time ago. And it was just, things were a little bit different. Jake slept with us every night. Like, you know what I mean? So I know like the impact that has on like families and relationships. And
so can I ask you a question?
Of course, please.
Now I'm going to interview you.
I'm ready. Right. I like it.
So you're on the opposite side of this experience as me. So you had Jake, and Jake passed. And since that time, you've encountered probably hundreds and thousands of families, and you've had to watch them bury their children.
Oh, God. Yes. So
now for us, we were given a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. We've met families all around the world through Facebook groups for Microlissencephaly, and we've watched at least 100 people whose children were born around the time Miles was born bury their children. And each time it always feels like there but for the grace of God. But it isn't even a whew, thank God. We're going to have our day. It's weird. I always look at it as a dress rehearsal. And I watch the other parents to see how they handle it. I only pray that Jolene and I have the level of grace that you've had to be able to handle it the way you do. And I don't know if other families have this experience, but every time we encounter another family that loses someone, that is something I look at, is how are they handling it? What did they do? What do you say to people? How do you form a funeral for a baby? All of these things are foreign to us. We don't talk about it in our culture. We don't talk about death, but it's constantly behind us. One day, our vice president of human resources called me in for an annual review and said, so where do you see yourself? This was directly after Miles was born. Where do you see yourself, in 5 to 10 years? And it was in that moment I actually started crying in the office. We don't look at the future. We don't see ourselves 5 or 10 years because the prospect of what we have to imagine that to be like is not anything that we want to deal with right now. We've always said we'll have time to mourn later, but right now we're going to live, we're going to sing, we're going to dance, we're going to enjoy our lives, and you can't do that if you're constantly in fear.
No, and that's a huge part of what I want to talk about with you too, because so to sort of address your piece about me, so we had to bury our son, and what I learned in that moment, not in that moment, but in those moments after, was that every moment I had with Jake was so special. And I did not want to lose that. So part of why we do the work we do with Jake's Help from Heaven, and part of why I sometimes feel like my most authentic self is with other families that look like mine used to look like, that doesn't look like it now, but how, like, that's who I am. Like, I'm Jake's mom, and I know, like, when I'm with Miles, that's why I'm like, oh, hey, David, hey, Jolene, I just want to hang out with him. Like, I'm like,
and his smile.
Yeah.
When he smiles at you, it just sort of melts you.
Oh, my God, it's just unbelievable. And now there's a handful of those kids that are just, but I will tell you that every time, in this past summer, we lost 4 of our Jake's kids, and it just sucks. I mean, I don't know how to say it any other way. It's like a little piece of me, like, sort of crumbles with it each time because it's just not fair. I mean, it's the simplest way to say it, but it's the most true. Like, it's all these other things, but it's just not right, and it's not fair. To kind of flip it back to your story, you've crushed the odds, like, right? Like, that is awesome. Like, and I read that though, but I read that with like a fear. There was this other girl, Caitlin, that we worked with, and she eventually passed away. And I remember talking to her mom. So her life expectancy, I want to say, was like 8 to 12. Mm-hmm. And that 12th birthday, she threw a party for her. Like, it was a big party. And she had a mermaid scheduled to come that canceled. And she reached out to me. She's like, this is so random, but like, I need a mermaid. And I was like, you got yourself a mermaid. She's like, I got the outfit, like, whatever. So I went because I was like, this is unreal, right? Like, she made it to this age that she wasn't supposed to. Like, this is awesome. But every year after that was just this gift, but she had to balance that life that you're saying, right? Like, and I love that you guys don't let the fear consume you. And I love one of the things that I did not know about you guys, but that you had shared, was that you have your 5 minutes a day. I love this. There's time to mourn later, but can you share that 5 minutes a day? Because I think that's got to make a difference in your outlook.
And I credit my wife for this. I mean, when Miles was born, I was, really broken up. Like I say, the sorrow of what you lost, the guilt over you feeling sorry for what you lost, all of that. She said, all right, David, you got 5 minutes. All right? You can take 5 minutes a day to cry, to scream, to ask God, to do whatever you have to do. But when you're done, you got to pull your big boy pants up and you got to get to work. You got to take care of the kid. You got to take care of us. You have to You have to live your life. I don't want to live a life of misery. We met a family very, very early on, and Jolene recognized immediately that their child had microcephaly. He was in a wheelchair, and she was so fixated on this child, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure you experienced that.
I totally know this.
But I was watching the family, and the father looked so beaten down. The other child just looked bored and just uncomfortable and just didn't want to be there. The mother seemed a little unsure as to whether she wanted to talk. They just seemed so tired.
Yeah.
And I never wanted that for us. And so it doesn't happen naturally. It's an effort. You have to play some music. You have to sing. You have to be silly. You have to put all of this stuff out of your mind. Yep.
I mean, and I love that about you guys because I've seen those same families, right? Like we are surrounded by families who are dealt the same hands we were dealt, and they just can't sometimes figure out how to.
A lot of them don't make it.
They just don't. And I remember, and I don't know at what point it was with Jake, but I remember like he had fluid on the brain. He had all these things. Like we couldn't fly with him. We just couldn't do stuff. Mm-hmm. But what we could do was we knew that he could be okay in the car for 3 hours. So we knew that 3 hours from Saratoga, we could go to Boston, we could go to New York City, we could go to Lake Placid, we could go to Montreal. Like these were places, these were things we could do. And if we went to New York and spent a night and then the next day we could go to DC. Like we could do stuff. And as soon as we wrapped our head around that, you find a way to not be limited. It's almost like we then really started living. And then, I don't know, I say it all the time, but like I loved my life, right? Yeah. Like I love that life. And I think you guys do too. You love that life.
So I work from home. I've been working from home since a few months after Miles was born. So this is way pre-pandemic. Okay. So I've been blessed and I've stayed with that company for just that reason, that they gave me that opportunity to be there when everything was so uncertain. But since that point, I work from home, so I'm always there. The nurses are in and out. The therapists are in and out. We are so cautious about everything. Everything is on a schedule. Everything has to be done on time. And he had his 10th birthday this year. And my birthday wish for him was that, I've spent these last 10 years trying to keep you alive, right? Trying to fight that 2 to 5. But now I want to help you live. So this summer we went to Cape Cod. We've spent a week in New Jersey on the beach. We're trying to do as many things as we can. That's what the chair that you brought for us a couple of weeks ago was for. We've had a change in Miles's condition. We had his annual visit with his primary care last month, roughly 2 weeks ago. He was concerned about scoliosis. Again, a lot of the diseases and things that people worry about down the road weren't our concern. We weren't worried about how caustic the medications were and what they were going to do to his liver when he's 30. Weren't worried about that. When we knew about the scoliosis, we weren't worried about it. We weren't focused on down the road. In the last year, his curvature has moved from roughly 27% to about 58%. At our visit 2 weeks ago with the doctor, we were told that we're either going to need to do a horrific surgery or within the 6 to 12 months, we'll be placing him on comfort care. So we followed up with the orthopedics. They're scheduling 2 to 3 months out. It'll be a surgery where they go from the base of his skull to his pelvis, down his spine, and reconfigure the muscles and the entire spine, fusing each vertebrae all the way up. It's over a 12-hour surgery.
So the fear if they don't do that is that the curvature will impact his ability to breathe.
It's already starting to put pressure on his heart. Okay. Next will be the lungs, and it's just a progression from that point. Comfort care is one level short of hospice care. Comfort care is you're not imminently going to pass away within the next day or two, but you are within the process that it's going to lead to you passing away.
So that was about 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
You didn't see that coming, I'm assuming.
So we...
it's a loaded question.
Look, we're on top of everything. I mean, we've been dealing with the orthopedics for several years. He had a Scoli vest that we've been, over the past year...
when I was at your house,
we've been getting it fixed at least 3 or 4 times because it's not quite fitting on him and it's moving and it's also not working, which is what we were told during our visits 2 weeks ago. So now we're exploring our options. We're definitely going to move forward with the surgery. It's just a matter of where. So we have a referral into Shriners.
Okay.
We have an appointment with New York Presbyterian in a month. But I'm getting pressure from my family and from my network because I'm pushing hard. my wife and I play good cop, bad cop, and I'm a bad cop because I know the system. I work in insurance. I'm not tolerating any push-offs. I'm not taking voicemails. I work my way up the chain of command of this organization. I have all day. Yep. All right?
No,
But it gets uncomfortable for everyone. And I'm trying to explain. I was talking to my dad. He's like, well, it'll be all right. Just let everything work out in time. We don't have that kind of time. If we're looking at 6 to 12 months and doctors are scheduling the procedure out 3 months out. And
your mind is like...
Right, and we're trying to just get an initial intake for a second opinion and a possible appointment at Shriners or New York Presbyterian. I need that to happen as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
All right? I have a deadline, and that deadline is Miles's life. And this is the sort of thing we deal with on a daily basis. I mean, whether it's trying to get prescriptions, whether it's trying to get the wheelchair. We went a year without a wheelchair because the provider just wasn't responding.
This is exactly why I was so compelled to start Jake's Help from Heaven, because I was you, right? Like I was, yes, full-time caretaker of Jake's, but like full-time pain in the ass to everybody. I used to have, Lana Baker was her name. She has since passed away, but she was our CDPHP rep. And it was back.
Your contact.
My contact. Yep. And I'd be like, hey, Lana. She'd be like, ugh. You know, I was like, we were just in Boston. This is what we need. And then she'd be like, well, I need this. And it was back in the day when actually you could call an insurance company and there was a person assigned to you and you could have a conversation with her. That's a different world now.
Well, now you only get that when you're me. And what I'll say to you is, you know, I'm going to make everybody's life uncomfortable that I come in contact with. At the very least, if you're uncomfortable, speak to your leadership about the processes and procedures and change them if you don't want to deal with me again.
You don't want to.
You know, if you don't want to deal with me, then you'll deal with my wife and she'll get what she wants. If she doesn't, then you're going to deal with me.
Then I'm back.
And I'm sorry, I'll apologize. It's not personal. You know, when somebody tells you, we'll call you back at the end of the day, or we'll get to it by the end of this week, we have a terminally ill child.
Yeah.
Like, time doesn't work the same for us. No. You think that's how I want to spend this next week? Do you think that's what I want to do with the little bit of time I have is argue with you for an hour? And I'm quick to point out we are now on the phone for 1 minute and 15 or 1 hour and 15 minutes. Like, this is an hour and 15 minutes
that I'm not
getting back.
Yeah.
It's hard. Healthcare workers get so desensitized that they forget that at the other end of every line is a parent who is so scared. And fear doesn't always come out like cowering in the corner.
No, it comes out like...
Yeah, like we're going to fight.
You are fighting for his life, right? When you talk about, you know, like your dad being like, okay, it's going to work out. I remember that. And that used to make me want to like punch people, right? Because, and no disrespect to anyone who's saying
sorry,
it.
Daddy.
Sorry, I won't punch you, I promise. But that piece of like, because my mind works that way too. You're like, okay, so if we don't solve this problem in 6 to 12 months, someone's going to try and solve it for us, and we don't like that solution. Mm-hmm. So you got to get ahead of it. I know that feeling so well, and I'm so sad and mad that you are in it, but I'm glad that it's you that's in it because you're going to get it done.
Rather than someone else.
Yes, you know what I mean? Because sometimes there's just, some people lose the fight.
You remember the emotional toll. Like, now we're 10 years in. Yeah. So now it's, David, I need you to call so-and-so. Then the nurse will tell me the next day, I need you to call so-and-so. And then the next day, my wife will say, I need you to call so-and-so. I don't know that they realize that I'm taking that time because I need that time in order to brace myself for what I'm going to have to do.
Yep. And it's the weight of your son's life.
Mm-hmm.
It's the weight of your son's life.
And failure is not an option. You show up at the pharmacy and they're like, oh, it's too soon to get this medication. Look, we have nurses, right? They're registered nurses. They know how to measure medication. Yeah. I don't know why it's not, why it's too soon. I just know I can't leave without this medication.
Yep.
Period. So however that's going to happen.
That fight is just constant and it's just exhausting. Mm-hmm. So back to Miles' surgery. So you are in that process now.
Yeah. There's a lot of fear.
There's got to be a lot of fear. I want to say this, and this is old information. He didn't have to have that surgery, but he had to have like this pretty complex like hip surgery that we had put off for as long as we could.
Mm-hmm. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Yep. We were going to do it at Boston Children's, and I just wasn't comfortable with, I mean, it's Boston Children's, best hospital ever. They did great by him, but I just was like, I don't feel like this is a great match. We went to Mass General. The orthopedics over there, and this again was old, but Dr. Grotkow is still there because I actually looked him up to see if he would be on this show. He's chief of pediatric orthopedics. I would recommend reaching out to them too. They were so, I mean, and I don't know that I can do any sort of intro now because they have had a million Jakes since my Jake. You know what I mean? Like, this is what they do. What I loved about that hospital was they took the gravity of the situation, but they also listened to the parents, and they listened. What was hard at Boston Children's was they were like, okay, he's going to not be able to leave the hospital until he does like X, Y, and Z. And I was like, Jake is not going to do X, Y, and Z.
Ever.
He is going to be here for like 6 weeks. Like, and some of it was dumb, but like poop or this. Like, I was like, he doesn't work on the same schedule as like me. Like, I could follow those. He can't. Mass General saw that. Like, we had this surgery. They made it so that we could go home, I would say like 48 hours after it. We got the equipment we needed. We figured out what we needed. And we came back. Like, I think we stayed in like a hotel for a couple of days just to make sure everything was fine. And then we came back like every 10 days or 2 weeks, like for a while. The fact was that we needed to get him out of that hospital and home.
Yep.
Because staying in that hospital, the longer we were there, the less likely we were going to
leave.
Out. I know you are all over it, but like those are some of the questions to make sure, because A, you need someone who's got the skill to do it for sure, and the experience and all of that, but you also need them to understand Miles. And like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And those are all things that we have to address and deal with. But again, timeline, it's, we're in November.
Who can get this done? Yeah.
We're in November already, and we don't have time.
And time is the one thing, right? Like, you can't slow it down.
But that's always, if we want to bring this full circle, that's also why it's so important that when you're in the moment, you can mourn later, right? You can spend your life crying and laying in bed, mourning loss once that loss has occurred. We need to enjoy what we have now. Yeah. And, this latest medical situation is reinforcing that for me. I don't know that after this surgery, Miles is going to be as mobile as he has been, and that's going to change. Remember, we got that seat because we're thinking about taking a cruise. We're thinking about taking flights and going places. I don't know that that's the way it's going to end up going. We're going to make the best of it. I mean, it's not just Miles's life. It's Oliver's life. It's Jolene's life. It's David's life. We're all in this together.
Have you told Oliver about the surgery?
So we did explain to him the surgery. We also tried to explain a little bit why there is a decision process, that quality of life makes a difference, that if it's going to impact Miles's quality negatively, drastically, we would have to evaluate that. So we told him how dangerous and how painful the procedure is. And his response was, well, death is a lot more painful, so I guess we're doing the surgery. 8 years old.
There is something so special about the siblings of kids like Jake and Miles. That is exactly it. And as you were telling the story, I was almost picturing you guys, like, I don't know if you were sitting around a table or not, but that's how I pictured it. And I will tell you, Ethan, and he was, younger because they were closer in age, and he came to all the doctor's appointments, and he would sit there sometimes, like we'd be sitting around a table and he would sit there. I mean, he was like 4 years old, and he'd be like listening and advocating. I don't know if advocating is the right word, because that's not the
right. It's his place at the table.
Yes, it was his brother, goddammit, and he was going to like make sense of it. And I love that, because I feel like that is, and it's important, I think, to have our typical kids be part of these conversations, because I see families sometimes where they try to separate it so much.
So I'm going to be honest. Having grown up with a disabled sister, coming into this for Oliver, I didn't want him to have anything to do with anything. I didn't want him to help. I didn't want him to feel any responsibility for Miles, because that's what weighed me down. Constantly worried about your sister. I used to have nightmares that something was going to happen to her and I wasn't going to be able to do anything about it. I didn't want that for him, but it's not something we forced on him. It's a role that he's asking to take, if that makes, and again, he knows how to give Miles his feeding tube. He knows how to stop the machine and all of that sort of stuff. He understands Miles's circumstance. I don't know whether he understands or has internalized the gravity of Miles's situation, but he is actively involved. He is constantly looking out for his brother. I used to feel embarrassment going out in public with my sister, and maybe bumping into friends from school who don't know I have a disabled sister. Like I remember dealing with all of that, and I didn't want any of that for Oliver, but I don't get the sense that he's getting any of that. I get the sense that he views Miles as an equal, as his brother. Just different, not worse, not better, just different.
It's like they don't know different, right? Like it's all they know. It's interesting with kids, right? Because they only know what they know. And in our situation, it's different than someone else's. But Ethan wrote his college essay, and he wrote about things that I didn't even he talked about like how, my friends would go watch their brothers play football or soccer, and I would go watch my brother at PT. It was different, but it wasn't worse. It wasn't better. It just was different, and I think it's okay.
What's weird is, so we had Miles first, and then we had Oliver. And I thought that by having a typical child, it would lessen the pain a little bit. But, we take Miles to school functions, Oliver's school functions, the school picnic. But I find myself when I'm around other children with Miles feeling resentful, or that he doesn't have that experience, that he can't run, that he can't ride his bike. He's there, but.
And you wonder, right? Like, is he looking at the kids running being like, I would do that.
Yeah.
It's like you want so badly the situation to be different, right?
And you feel guilty for that?
Yes.
Too.
And I was like, but I hate even saying that, because then you want them to know that they are 100% okay the way they are, and that there is nothing wrong with them. And I still struggle with that. And Jake's almost gone 14 years.
So in order for me to deal with it, I view it as blessings. I would want blessings for everyone. I know that not everyone is going to get a blessing, and that doesn't mean that their life is doomed or they're somehow lesser than. But, I love Miles exactly the way he is. I would, of course, love for him to have been blessed to be able to do other things, but it doesn't diminish the things that he can do. You get to experience something he does. Miles is nonverbal, non-communicative. He has the ability to touch every single person who sits in a room with him.
That freaking smile.
He'll look at you right in your eye, and he'll smile. And that is the only form of communication he has. I used to think to myself, with all of this, he still found a way.
And that smile, it will almost make me tear up right now, because that smile says everything.
They'll see it if they see the pictures.
Yeah, no, they definitely will. Do you guys talk about it? Do you talk about, or is that part of the push-off? Yeah.
No. Jolene and I don't. So 2 weeks ago when he went for his annual, she texted me while she was there. It's all doom and gloom. And I remember standing there for a second, and I purposely didn't do anything. I didn't text her back. I didn't call her. And I said to myself, I want this 5 minutes not to know. I don't know what she's going to tell me.
You can't go back.
Right. You can't unhear it, and you can't. And I could tell by the way she had texted me that the news was going to be altering. Yeah.
Otherwise, because she's used to this too.
Right,
this
exactly.
is her world too. It's not.
Our doom and gloom is different than everybody else's doom and gloom.
I was going to say that is, it's. I talked about it with a guest once, and we talked about, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was kind of like having to find the balance, right? Like when you have a friend who's like, oh my God, my kid's homesick, or my kid broke their ankle, or, and it's hard sometimes to be a good friend, because I'd want to be like, I would give $1 million for a broken ankle to be my worst day.
The worst thing that ever happened.
My kid had this happen. And still even sometimes I am like, okay, Heather, don't roll your eyes. Be a nice person. Like, find your zen. And it's hard sometimes.
So I've seen, we talked before we got here that, I have a sister, growing up I had a disabled sister. So I have two sisters. My younger sister is disabled, and I have an older sister, 2 years older than me, who also has a disabled child. And I remember when Lisa had Brianna, I remember thinking to myself the hard work that she was doing and everything they were going through. I even said to Jolene, I could never do what my sister does. I don't know how she does it. I remember the conversation I had, and now I'm in that situation, and unfortunately, Miles is much more severely affected than my niece and my sister.
So Brianna, for the audience, is also a Jake's Help from Heaven.
Yes, she is.
So we are like deeply entwined with your family.
So let's talk about Jake's Help for Heaven for a second.
Okay.
You guys are amazing. And I want to tell you why. So, like you said, you met us when Miles he wasn't even one yet. So you met him in 2014. He was born in July of 2014. So it had to be within those 5 months, right?
Yep.
We were bombarded with so much stuff. We're scared. We're hurt. We don't know what we're doing. You guys were there for things like that. The bumble chair, right? The bumble chair you got us.
Yep.
I mean, we didn't even understand how important seating options is. just finding different places to sit non-ambulatory kids so that they keep their circulation, so they don't get bed sores. Yep. So we weren't even aware these things were available. So it wasn't even just about you guys being willing to provide them. Knowing what we need, having your loan program where we can try something out, and if it's something we like, we can keep it. We can keep it or get something similar to it. Yep. Prior to Epidiolex, Miles had, in addition to everything, has seizures. We were buying out of pocket Charlotte's Web.
Yes,
from Colorado.
I was talking about Charlotte's Web the other day. Charlotte's Web is CBD that before you could routinely get CBD, we had a lot of applicants who found seizure relief from CBD. And this was when you could only get it in Colorado, and you had to have it shipped, and it was not regulated price-wise. So 1 month it could cost X amount, the next month it could cost whatever.
Usually over $1,000 a month.
Yep. And it just, but for so many of our families, it was the only thing in so long that had provided relief.
Yep. Yeah, you guys reimbursed us for it. I mean, we had spent years paying for it. Thinking it was just something we were going to have to do. The syringes. I'm still struggling with this one. Manufacture for tube-fed children who are fed through a G tube that's inserted into their stomach, you administer their medication through that tube. And they changed the type of tube. So it used to be you could go to the pharmacy, get your medication, and they would provide you with syringes, not the ones with needles.
No, but just little plastic.
Yeah, little plastic squirter things that you can stick in and squirt the medication in. Once the manufacturer of the G tube changed their connector, nobody has any of the new type of syringes. All of a sudden, we had no way to administer medication to Miles. And we bought them on Amazon, and then you guys reimbursed us.
This is one of those things, though, where I feel like this is exactly where our healthcare system is a cluster and fails us. How ridiculous is that, right? Like, we sit here and laugh about it because if you don't laugh about it, it's just one more thing that makes you angry at everybody, right? And no one wins.
Hold on, believe me, there were hours worth of me yelling at different people in different organizations over this issue and their responsibility. I tried to call the McClellan. I tried to call the manufacturer. I tried to call the pharmacies.
And you're not the only one, right? Like, but how can this be? Like, how can we take tube-fed children and change their tube so that then nothing works?
Yep.
We should be able to do better. We're not working with a system that gives a shit about kids like ours.
We're the outliers.
Yes. And where everything is targeted towards a certain demographic that is not our sick kids. We're going back a little bit to that, like, we only want to see what we want to see. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we need to be louder, and we need to be, and I love that you take Miles to like all of Oliver's stuff. We used to do that with Jake too. And sometimes it's hard because sometimes I think about what you said about when you were the brother and you were embarrassed. Like, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I sometimes didn't have that with Jake, and it's not embarrassed of Jake, but it's just that moment of, why can't I just for a minute be like them? Like, why can't my problems be that my kids who are 15 months apart won't stop fighting with each other? Yep. Or, I need a glass of wine because the kids have been loud all day.
And you feel guilty about it.
You just feel horrible.
But
like,
it's human.
Even saying it out loud, right? You just, I feel awful. But I also think it's important to be real about it, too, because other people are having that feeling, too.
Yeah. Sometimes you feel, they don't deserve them. I've had that feeling, too.
Yeah.
It's a hard place to be. No one is perfect.
Yes.
And in fact, I talked to my wife, as we made our decision about the upcoming surgery, but I've also talked to our nurses, and I'm like, so first of all, our whole house is based on order and schedule, right?
Yep.
Now the whole schedule is off. We've added a new feeding, which changes the time for all the other feedings. All the medicines were based off the times of the feedings.
I think we talked about that offline. So you are giving... Because of this surgery, you have to sort of prep.
We're bulking him up. We want to make sure that he has enough weight on himself to handle any eventuality. Whatever happens.
Yeah, he's got a little in the reserves.
Yeah, he's a little light. Everything's different now, and there's going to be some drop balls. If he's supposed to get a specific medication at 6:30 because he eats at 7:30 and now he's eating at 5:30, you may miss that 6:30. You may be late on it, and we need to all treat each other with some grace, over these next few months. Exactly.
Yep.
And it might be me, it might be you, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on all of us. We just need to be conscious to give each other some grace.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because you just said something that brought me way back, right? Jake ate by mouth. By the grace of God, I have no idea how he did. Like, it was becoming more difficult, and we were certainly having the conversation about whether he should have a G-tube or not. I could successfully feed him with a higher success rate than Brian. But Brian, of course, wanted to feed his kid and did fine, like did great. But I will tell you, when he fed him and he threw up all his meds and all his food, and I was like, he doesn't have the weight to do it, I went from like 0 to 800. Mm-hmm. I had to work really hard at it. He gave me a lot more grace than I ever gave him, if I'm being totally honest. But it's so hard, right? Because, and I still struggle. Like, and I'm, I turned 50 this year, and I'm like, the year of 50 is that Heather is going to recognize that she can't control everything, right? And that is my lesson a little bit. Like, I can't do everything. Things are going to fall through the cracks, and you just got to be okay with it. Yep. But I'm getting better. Like, I'm getting more like, life goes on.
So did you and your husband stay together?
Yeah. We just celebrated 20 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, how often do you see that within this population? I've seen so many broken families, and I think that what you're talking about has a lot to do with it. You have the pressure of dealing with day to day, and then something goes wrong. Whose fault is it? I try to remove that. Just deal with whatever happened. Look, somebody didn't close the tube, and we just fed a whole bag of feed into the couch. Got to get the couch cleaned up. Yeah. One of us will go get a onesie, one will go get towels. Rather than, who did this? Why didn't you?
It's hard.
It's important to do that. I don't know that a family or a relationship can survive if you're not giving each other that level of grace, that we're all going to make mistakes and we're all living this at the same time in the same space, but coping with it different ways.
And the tension, the underlying tension of you're dealing with life and death.
Yeah.
So I don't, we survived Jake getting sick out of nowhere. We survived him passing away.
It's not easy, is it?
No, God, no. It's still not easy. Although
it's not always pretty.
No, I can tell you was often not pretty. But I don't, he was one of my first guests on the show, and we talked about things sitting in these chairs that we hadn't talked about in a really long time, and it was interesting. I think similar to how you are talking about, like you and Jolene, like, we knew our job was to keep Jake alive. That was, at the end of the day, the other shit didn't matter because we were just trying to keep our kid alive. And Jake died on my watch, and I
worry about that.
It's not great.
I know.
At Jake's service, Brian spoke, and he thanked me for everything I did to keep him alive for as long as I did, and how hard I worked at it, because I was the primary, right? Like, I was the day in, day out. That was such a gift to me. I needed that because it was my watch. Like, my kid died on my watch. I don't know that I would have given him that grace, right? Like, I don't know that I could suffer. Like, I can suffer this loss because I don't have any blame on anyone else. I'm okay blaming myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to put that on anyone. And the fact that he could be okay with that, I think, is why we're together, because that's beautiful, right?
I honestly don't think Miles would be alive today if it weren't for the relationship that Jolene and I have. And I view our relationship as the linchpin to everything else.
It's like you got to be in it together, I think, because it's too much for one person.
Together,
yeah.
Hey.
Well, because you need to sometimes you can tap out, right? Like, and
here's our arrangement. I'm not a morning person, right? I'm a night owl. I can stay up till 2 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and be up at 6, go to work. Jolene is a morning person. She's not a night person. Her and Oliver are in bed by 8:30, right? So I take the night shift. So from the evening till if we don't have a nurse, I'll sleep with them that night. And in the morning at 8:30, I'm out. Jolene, we're swapping in. There's been times where I've gotten out of Miles's bed and went upstairs and got in our bed, just because you can't really sleep.
No,
you're not. It's not a full sleep. Because you have to be in the bed with him, because if he has a seizure, he could aspirate, he could suffocate.
And you got to be ready to act.
Yeah,
you can't be.
So I sleep with him laying on my arm,
which then goes
because I have to sleep.
Yeah.
Right. So, but if you're on me and you have a seizure,
you're going to feel
your seizure is going to wake me up, and then I can wake up. That's just our routine. And a lot of people don't understand. Some people are like, hey, well, why don't you guys swap and alternate back and forth? Because quite honestly, I'm not getting up in the morning. I'd rather stay up and do the night shift.
our lives are so different to most lives
Yeah.
that, like, you said, oh, I have him sleep on my arm. And I'm like, oh, I know that, right? Yeah. Because then you can feel, when he starts to go, you got it.
Yep.
But then also, like, your arm goes dead, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, I have had times when
you have to ignore it.
Lift your arm because you don't even know that it's still attached to you.
or he's been sick and he finally went to sleep, and I'm just going to forget the fact that my arm is asleep.
Yeah.
Because it's the better of the two options of waking him up, and now we're dealing with crying or
and the whole thing. Yep. But it's those pieces that, and I know people mean well, but then they're like helpful hints, and you're like, oh, okay, you're right. I never thought of doing anything to, like
this was our first choice, right? Let me I love our life. I don't love this life for everyone.
No.
I wouldn't wish this life on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade it.
No.
The experiences, the people that we've met, it brings out the best and the worst out of people, which allows you to surround yourself with the best people.
Well, it gives you a real clear focus of who's on your side and who's not. There is a special place in my heart for the people who knew me as Jake's mom, who knew me in that role.
They knew your best you.
And it's a version of me. It's not always, like, I don't know what to do with it sometimes. It's why I talk about all this stuff. It's why I do Jake's Help from Heaven.
Is it sometimes like you're looking in?
I sometimes have to keep myself in it more because I don't want to forget that it happened, right? Like, and it's, as time passes, that's my current fear, right? Because the worst fucking thing happened. But now what if I forget? What if I can't tap into that feeling? What if I can't remember Jake looking at me? What if I can't, like, that's the fear, right? Because that's all I got now. Like, I've got these memories and I can't lose them.
I've thought about that a lot. I don't want anybody to forget that he was here.
David, that is my fear in life. That is why I get on this goddamn podcast and talk every week. He was here and he was real, and Miles is real. And
they're important.
They're so important. They are so important. And I would dare say they are more important than most people. And they are worthy of being remembered. And it is our job to keep them front and center. They deserve it.
That's another one that bothers me too. God only gives people. They would have never given them to you if you weren't.
It's funny, though. I used to think sometimes along the way, like, right, because I lived this life up until a certain point. And so Hillary is Esme's mom, and her and I had this conversation once, and we were talking about, I was like, up to a certain point in my life, like, I wouldn't say it was, I got everything I wanted. That's not what I would say. But, like, I got into the college I wanted, right? I, like, got the job I wanted. I, like was plugging along in this very, like, regular life. And then Jake got sick, and I was like, oh, okay, like, pivot, right? This is I'm finding a new me. I'm finding this new thing. Then Jake died, and I'm like, Jesus. And there was this part of me that was like,
what do you do? Like, who are you?
Who am I? But also, like, what did I do? Like, why? Like, before I could separate myself from it, I kind of felt like I must have done something wrong in life to be dealt this card before I flipped the switch and recognized, it has nothing to do with any of that. But I'm lucky enough to be Jake's mom. Other people could have screwed this shit up, and I did it. Like, I did it pretty damn good, too. You know what I mean? Like,
you're still doing it.
And I'm still doing it.
You're still doing it.
Like, so it's interesting. Like, I think other people give you that stuff, but even in my head, I gave myself this, like, what did you do to, like, and I wouldn't live in that space a long time, but it would creep in, right? Like, it creeps in. And
I call it many minds. You have to stay focused.
You got to stay the course.
Yep.
You got to lock in.
Yep.
So I want to say this because you guys have a big couple months ahead of you, a couple weeks, couple months. I want you to know that we at Jake's are here for you guys in whatever you need. I am here for you guys. I have faith in Miles.
Me too. He's an amazing kid.
He sure is.
And he's not done yet.
No, I was going to say his story's not over. He's got this.
So one of my pet peeves coming into this life and watching other people bury their children was, oh, so-and-so got their wings. So-and-so got their wings. Another angel.
And now they're running.
I remember saying, Miles is not allowed to have wings. I'm forbidding it.
He doesn't want the damn wings.
Exactly. We're not getting any wings. Okay. We're keeping him.
He's not running and kicking balls in heaven. He's staying right here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So
as long as he can
we're gonna do our best to make sure leave on a bright note.
All right.
Okay. So we went to New Jersey this summer. I spent a week in Long Branch, New Jersey. So, we stayed at this resort, and we were out by the pool. We had Miles in a little lounge chair. Oliver was in the pool. And there was a woman trying to get a chair through the door. So I went to help her. She had a wheelchair. And she had, a young man in the wheelchair. And he had microlissencephaly. And he was 21 years old.
Oh.
So we sat next to the pool with her and her son. Just a little foreshadowing. You know,
I love
again,
that.
when he was born, you didn't see any adults.
Nope.
But now we're seeing 10-year-olds. We're seeing 12-year-olds. We're seeing 20-year-olds. So
I love it. This is corny, but that is awesome, right? Like that is awesome that you're at the same place at the same time. Like there are cool moments.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, like there's a cool moment there, and there's something to, like, yes.
I think we needed that.
Yep.
To see that possibility.
We often end the show with a segment that is called, and you've actually already done this.
Yeah, I've already asked you questions.
Yeah, I was going to say the Ask Heather Anything piece, so you've already kind of covered it.
Well, here, I will ask you to keep doing what you're doing. You have been helping my sister. I didn't even know you guys existed. The amount of people that you've helped is amazing, and the help that you're giving is help that you can't get anyplace else. You guys are the beacon within our community for anything you can't get through the insurance company. For our family, it means a lot.
I'm happy you let me into your lives because it means a lot to me.
Well, you're stuck now.
Thank you for listening to A Place of Yes. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you really like this episode, please share it with a friend. It would make a world of difference if we could just reach more people and share the work that we do and the stories we want to tell. Thank you so much for watching.